Ragnhild Sageng, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
Also popularly known as Bridget.
Yes.
So Bridget doesn't strike me as like a hacker name.
No, it's
No.
it's just Bridget. I often think of Bridget Jones whenever someone calls me Bridget, but it is basically because my second first name is Birgitta, and Bridget is
Birgitta.
the closest English name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we like it. Welcome, Bridget.
Thank you.
So tell us about yourself.
Well, I work for Norwegian Customs as a senior security advisor. And prior to that, I worked as an ethical hacker, specializing in social engineering.
Cool.
And I've been doing that for a couple of years, and I love to talk about social engineering and how humans respond to that.
So why don't you unpack that for us? Because somebody reached out to me the other day and was like inviting me to a social engineering course. And I'm like, I'm the farthest thing from a hacker, like, or what I would define as a hacker. But he was like, no, but you're a sales guy. Like you should definitely know how to social engineer people. And I was like, okay, so there's a connection there. What do you think about that?
It is.
Yeah?
Oh, it definitely is. Yeah. I oftentimes, when I meet salespersons, I oftentimes tick off boxes mentally in my head. Oh, yeah, they're using that technique now and this
Oh, man.
technique. And I just know. And it's just like, I usually don't fall for it because I'm just analyzing it as part of having some fun. But yeah, it is. So it is the same. Basically, when humans are thinking of social engineering and cybersecurity, we think of, oh yeah, that's those phishing emails, etc. But social engineering in itself is a technique that every human uses each day to get what we want. And I oftentimes say that is basically what the kids are doing to their parents every single day to get what they want. So yeah, salespersons definitely use social engineering techniques. And that is because the social engineering techniques, it's what makes people do what we want them to do or give the information we want them to give us.
I guess another word for social engineering is kind of manipulating. That's a
Yeah,
meaner word, I guess.
it is the same equivalent.
So you were many years as a pentester, right?
Yeah,
How?
a couple,
Yeah,
two.
couple years. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
it's a few years.
yeah.
Ett par på norsk. I was thinking just like how much of your time spent as a pentester was on social engineering compared to like the bits and bytes sort of, because you kind of have to have both, right?
Yeah, I was doing some basic web app pen testing and aiding in different things, but my main task was to be an analyst of sorts. Like in bigger red team operations, my job would be to analyze the open source intelligence that was out there, look into social media profiles of companies, etc., to see what angle can we take to get into the human elements. So mostly that's what I did. I did some of the techie stuff, but not as intense as a lot of the really, really good ethical hackers I know out there. A lot of the pentesters I know are technical geniuses. I usually tend to the human element of it. So it was nice. It was nice working together and help them to get the entry point in bigger operations. And I also did a lot of pure social engineering tests where it was sending out the SMS smishing and some phishing, etc., creating those based on the techniques used against humans. And I also did some physical pen testing where the main goal was to see if you can access restricted areas or get information or see if people have left things on their printer, for instance, which is not according to policy and so on. And then I report on it to see, okay, what procedures do you need to change to make the company more secure as a whole when it comes to the human threat.
In 2024, do you think it's easier to do social engineering through digital means now than it was a couple years ago?
Oh, wow, that's a really, really hard question because I would say it is about the same. We might be more aware in a sense. I like to think that we're more aware, but you never know. Because there's a lot of things in media about phishing and how people are being scammed, etc. Love scams and so on, and phones, wishing calls. And one can only hope that people are getting more skeptical. But in the heat of the moment, everyone can be fooled. Even I, who also has tried to educate myself on the topic, can be fooled. And I would like to think that, yes, maybe we are a bit harder to fool, but I don't think so. And now with the rise of AI and how that is being utilized to create different pretexts and to fake voices, etc., I think it will be harder for us for a little while before it gets better.
Right. I forgot who it was. I think it was somebody from Zscaler on LinkedIn today said if you're reachable, you're breachable. I thought that was a good one.
Exactly.
Right.
And I agree with that. If you're reachable, you are breachable, basically, because everyone can be fooled, and we learn new stuff every day, but so does the adversaries. They learn new angles. When one angle doesn't work, they make up a new one.
Yeah.
And
Luckily
so it's a
for them,
standoff.
there's lots of angles to take, right?
Exactly.
Right. As somebody that does this for an ethical manner, ethical social engineering. On the other side of all these attacks that you just mentioned, there's a person that, explain the feelings that's gonna most likely go on in that person's head as a target of social engineering once they figured out that they've been tricked or manipulated.
Yeah, definitely. When I used to work with social engineering pen testing, I started to think a lot about, well, here I am doing all these tests, and there are people involved that I have to report back on. And what happens to those people afterwards? I mean, we can all think about it, how much we laugh about people who have been fooled by someone, and what will happen to those you test, and how will they respond emotionally to it all? Like if they had opened the door for me, for instance, or given me access to a restricted area, will their bosses be, hey, let's look at the procedures here now and see what we need to improve on? Or would it be like, well, you're going to go to a mandatory security awareness training course and you're not getting paid for it while you're doing it? Or even worse, in a lot of foreign countries outside of Norway, because we have a lot of good unions, some people even get fired. And it's not unheard of that, for instance, third-party vendors such as cleaning companies loses their contract after holding the door for someone that wasn't supposed to enter the building. And the only problem is that we are placing the blame on a single individual instead of the whole system itself, because it is not an individual's failure, it's a systemic failure. When one person can fail, everyone else can fail as well. So it is all about, do we focus on a single individual who sort of failed the test, or do we try to look at the reason why and how to secure that element so it doesn't happen again, to put around controls, to strengthen that particular area, to, for instance, have granulated control of the door, etc. In the case where someone is holding the door, maybe you should have like vent to get people in one by one, etc. So that made me think that maybe we should look into that. Maybe we should think, what about all these cool social engineering pen test stories you're listening into? People are listening to the war stories, and usually when I tell a war story, I can always hear, the laugh when someone is giving me access, and you're like telling it to the crowd, and they're like laughing a bit because they're thinking, I would never fall for that. They maybe they think that, maybe they're like, I'm more shocked and like, oh yeah, that was awful. Or but it is we think like that because we really want to believe that we would not fall for it. And I wanted to explore the other side of that, the other side of the cool war stories where people are being duped, but to look at how do people actually respond to being duped, and how should we actually treat them? What should a pen tester demand from a company? And what should a company demand from the pen tester when humans are involved in the test?
And I, in my 8 years of being involved in penetration testing, this sort of stuff, I've never actually came across this topic, not once.
It's important. It's important to think about the human element itself. Because when we do, even if we are doing not only pen tests, if you are doing internal phishing simulations, for instance, there are tons of, Twitter, now X, content out there where you see people are, yeah, exactly, where you see people are nagging about the fact that, well, they were fooled in a phishing test and now they have to take security awareness training, or now I can't trust my boss anymore because they fooled me thinking they were my boss, and now they're like yelling at me because I was stupid. And there are so many people out there. You clearly see that even when people are doing internal testing, they're handling it wrong. They're either doing the content of their phishing simulation in such a manner that people are feeling like they have been scammed of something, like getting a Christmas bonus, for instance. And then they're told like, oh yeah, that wasn't a Christmas bonus. You have been duped and now you need to do training. It's like dangling candy in front of a baby and taking it away and then punish them because they wanted the candy. It's just not right. And we never think about it because all we're thinking about is the end goal. We need to make this user safe. And it's just not about that. It's about strengthening the human element itself. And to do that, we need to make people not fall into distress. We need to make them feel like, okay, so I failed, but that means now I have an opportunity to learn and evolve. And to do that, it's all about how we're handling it. If you would have gone to, for instance, a kid and they would have done something wrong and you started yelling at them, what are the odds that if they do something wrong again, they will tell you about it? They will not tell you. Yeah, exactly. 0. They will not tell you if they have done something wrong the next time. They will try to hide it. So if a user pushes a link and they get yelled at because, oh, you're so stupid, you pushed a link, you shouldn't have done that. Well, they will not tell you when they get a phishing email and push the link. So if they have pushed a phishing simulation and they've been punished, well, why should they even tell you that they've done it again? They are afraid of getting punished and they will hide it. And if they hide it, well, maybe the attacker had gotten access to the system, maybe no alerts have been triggered, and all of a sudden you have a ransomware attack on your hands, which could have been prevented if the user felt psychologically safe enough to actually say, hey, I think I've done something I shouldn't be doing.
Right. Yeah, I really liked your example there with the gavekort, the gift card.
Yeah.
And you had some other ones in your Black Cat chat, the dream job thing.
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing a few of those? Because I think those are things that people definitely should not do, you know?
Yeah, definitely. So the one with the gift card, first of all, that actually happened to GoDaddy a couple of years ago. They actually sent out a gift card, a Christmas bonus, I think it was. They wanted to give a Christmas bonus to their employees. And I think this was during COVID times and people were, really far off. A lot of people needed the money and people were so happy, they were thinking that, oh, it's finally going to solve itself. I might have enough food to put food on the table for Christmas and I might even have enough of presents for family. And then all of a sudden they were told that it was all a scam. And they actually, I think I also heard that they got this on a Friday afternoon and they went home and didn't hear about it being a scam before after the weekend.
So they might have spent that money.
Yeah, like maybe they used their MasterCard and say, yeah, I can pay it back,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, they still went in with this sense of relief. Like if you would have been told that you would get some money and it would actually solve your problem and then it was taken away from you, I wouldn't be happy. And it has happened in a lot of cases also with pen testing where people have been fooled, for instance, to, one of the stories that I oftentimes tell is about a pen tester in the US who had to check around on social media, and he found a guy who had posted this picture of himself, with a card on and everything, his access card, and it was like, finally got a job of my dreams, it said. And well, he had to use that in the report because he used that picture to make himself a fake access card and got into the building using that fake access card as a ruse, seemingly like he belonged there. And this guy, he had just lost his father and he was like, oh, I finally got a job of my dreams. My father would be so proud of me, it said. And then he lost the job. When the managers read that report, they thought of him as a liability to the company. And then he lost a job he had dreamed of. Just because of that, instead of, people saying that, okay, this might not have been a good idea. Now we learned, so now we're going to put that up in our transcript saying that we should not post pictures of our card, or maybe tell him that, hey, this happened. This should not happen again. Now we were lucky that was just a pen tester doing it, That person would have learned from that experience if it had been handled correctly, but he just lost his job. And it has been some grave consequences, We often think of social engineering as, okay, that is it, you make people give away credentials or information. But it also happens when people are pranking others, for instance. There was this Australian radio show back in 2012 that decided to call the hospital where Kate Middleton was residing when she was pregnant and pretend to be part of the family and get information about her health status. And they sent this live on the radio show. And this nurse, she believed them and gave away information. And 2 weeks later, she killed herself. I mean, we do not know if it was other circumstances, but that was the triggering factor to push her over the edge. She might have had a really bad time in her life otherwise, but that was the factor that triggered it to eventually, at least they're assuming that was the factor. She didn't leave a note to my knowledge, but I mean, if I would have been that radio host, I would feel so bad.
Yeah. So there's and this I wouldn't. Is this a part of the pensum for pen testers doing these sort of things?
Well, what pensum?
Right, yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. A lot of pen testers usually do social engineering as a part of their red team job or part of a bigger operation. And some people think about it and others do not. I mean, most ethical hackers or pen testers are self-made. They make their way there. They learn how to pen test, and some of them are also really good at getting people to give away what they want. There are courses out there that provide people with knowledge on how to use social engineering, and some of them will also go into that thought of, well, you should leave people better off for having met you. And they try to do that, but it's really hard because you never know how a person will respond on the other end. You might think that, oh, well, I've done it correctly. I mean, they should feel good about it. But maybe not. Maybe you would have felt good about it, but you do not know the mental state of that other person, meaning that you would have to take care of them or have more responsibility in how they're dealt with after they get knowledge of that they have been duped. Like, you need to focus on getting the customer to have proper debriefings. You as a pen tester need to focus on how the company is willing to deal with them. And actually, you have to have the courage to say, well, you know what, I don't want to take the job because I don't feel secure enough that you will deal with these humans well afterwards. Because some pen tests are all about humans. And some pen tests you only get initial access from a human, and you can try to anonymize the report a bit and try to not disclose who it was, but usually you have to because the account has been compromised. But then it's your responsibility as a pen tester to actually ask the questions. Well, if I get a hold of someone who will give me credentials, how will you deal with them? But asking those questions is not something that you inherently learn to do. And that doesn't make the pen tester a bad person for not asking it. It's just about they need to know.
Oh, their goal is just to accomplish the means to an end, right? And then they celebrate.
Yeah.
They, unless they've burned themselves or, worst case, burned somebody else, right? Then they wouldn't know that. Unless they heard this podcast, I guess.
Yeah, well, I can only hope that some of them will listen into this and be like, oh yeah, maybe I should take that up, in my questionnaire when doing this. And because we all think that, well, people should deal with it. And I know a lot of people out there, not just only pen testers, but a lot of people who would act like, well, if they're stupid enough to give away their credentials, they would have to deal with it, Then if they're so stupid, and people will be like that. But then again, what if it happened to you? I mean, it could happen to you. Even the best pen tester out there could be fooled if the circumstances is right. So we need to think about it, that everyone can be fooled. And that makes it our responsibility to also help them deal with the aftermath of it and help them to get into that mode where they can start the learning process and learn from the experience.
So all the pen testers out there listening to this, make sure you add those questions at the end. I think that's just a very healthy conversation to have with your client as well. And healthy for the client themselves to reflect on that as well, because maybe I don't think they think about that. They may not think about that as much as we would expect them to either, right?
No, and they will actually just respond then and there. They would get a report and they haven't really thought about it. And they will be like, oh, we need to do something about this. And then they will do something. And then they will end up feel guilty because they have done something that had an adverse reaction for that person. So we should always think of it as, well, I oftentimes say that when you're doing bigger pen tests and humans going to be involved, especially when you're doing something with phishing simulations or even internally phishing simulations, or doing pen tests where you're going to call someone to an extent, maybe have HR involved in it to actually have them. I know people will say, well, that will be a gatekeeper, they will take away all the fun and all that. But is it really fun if someone is rendered feeling like shit afterwards? So you gotta take it all in and just think about it, and at least have someone take care of them in the aftermath. If it is HR, for instance, having talks with people and let them vent, let them talk about their experience so that they can finally, start healing and get over it. So I oftentimes try to say to the companies that, what, if any one of the people I met, usually when I did social engineering tests and I went in physically or had to talk to someone, I oftentimes say that, well, if they need to talk with me afterwards, I'm open for it. They can call me. We can have a video chat. We can do that so that people can feel that they can talk through the event with me and not just feel like someone they trusted then and there fooled them. I mean, if you have been scammed by someone, you would feel so ashamed and you would feel so mad at that person for scamming you. And if you have all those reactions, you will not be ready to start healing and to start thinking logically about the experience. You will just have this emotional roller coaster inside of you, and where it will go through all the stages of sadness and anger and everything. And you will just not, it will take time to get over it. And for some people, they will never get over it. So by resetting that relationship that happened, while you were fooling them, you will make it for them such that they will be ready to learn. They will feel like, oh, well, okay, this happened. We talked about it. Now I can start thinking about the situation. What could I have done differently? And how can I progress going on from here?
I'm sitting here thinking that every pen test, somebody's going to get their feelings hurt, whether it's the employee that you're phishing, or the CISO that whatever didn't organize things properly, or the pen tester that didn't make it work, right? So yeah, I like your approach of because it's usually, I guess, there's usually an employee that's not to blame, but that's the way in, right? Sitting there and just maybe having a conversation, saying, or the way I would do it as a social manipulator myself, I guess, or a social engineer, I should say, just say, hey, we did this test because XYZ. It's important to protect the company. We know that the whole goal was to trick you into doing this, and it's not because we want to, prove that you're wrong or anything, but we really want to have this conversation with you now to hear how you are, like the circumstances, and how can we prevent this from happening again? Not for you, but for the role that you're in, because we know that your job is to do X and Y. How would you, how can we remove this risk? And it's not about you, and try to. Is that something that would be like a nice way of approaching it, or?
Yeah, I think so, because you have to take it away from personal blame and to look at it as a systemic thing. Like, you need to figure out what to do to secure the surrounding area and to help a person not fall for the same thing again. So it's not about blaming a person, saying that, oh, you fell for it, you're stupid. That's not how it works. So you got to start thinking about it rationally and having an approach where you don't focus on the human itself when trying to solve the problem is a good approach. And if you also make room for the people who have been affected by it having emotional reactions to it, and allow them to have an emotional reaction, then you can come quite far. And I would also say that when people are testing, when pentesters are testing people, it is also important to think of them as people, not just an end to me. Means, it's just not about just getting that password no matter what. You have to think about how you're doing it. Are you going to make them feel so emotionally distressed that they're going to give it away to you? Are you going to lure them, trying to give them something and not giving it to them, for instance? You have to think about the way you're doing it. And I know people will say, yeah, well, but the attackers do it. Yeah, but that's what separates us from the bad guy. I mean, usually when we're testing computers, we're thinking, well, what separates us from the bad guy there? No, well, it's you either get in or you don't. But usually when you're testing the system, you don't actually launch ransomware on there just to prove a point as a pentester. You don't render the data useless, or you steal the data and say, hey, you're not getting them back now because you were stupid. You're not doing that. You stop at a certain point. And you got to do that as well when you pentest humans. And, well, how will they learn, people say? People often ask me, well, how will they learn if you're not using the same techniques? Well, you're not. And I oftentimes compare these two things, because I oftentimes think of pentesting humans and doing phishing simulations as something that maybe we need a bit of a change in the future. It's not something that we might have right here, right now. But when it comes to human pentesting, maybe it's better to have this approach that we're doing like a fire drill exercise. Like saying, hey, someone named Fred is going to come within the next 3 months. And he's going to try and gain access. And the one who stops him, they get a challenge coin. Like, they're going to get something, a treat, And within those 3 months, maybe someone will come up and they will have like this sweater on, which will say Fred. And they will try to fool a person. And then they will see, wait a minute, it says Fred. Like, the subconscious will be starting to work, and they'll be, wait a minute, you're not allowed to be here. And that in itself, yes, of course, he didn't get to breach them. But they will have the courage to actually stop someone when it counts later on. They will start learning from that process. Because when we are doing CPR training, for instance, we're not actually having a person having a heart attack in front of the people learning CPR and say, hey, you got to save him now. We're doing it on dolls. And it doesn't make us worse at doing CPR when it counts. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on it, at least. Because I think that, yes, as it is now, we have this way of testing people, doing phishing simulation on a regular basis internally. With a lot of companies do that, at least, especially in the US, and a lot of Norwegian companies do as well. And then some people have pen tests purely on human element, and some it's only a part of the whole thing. It's just about, when it's just about the people, we might need to rethink how we do it.
Right.
One thing is checking a lock or checking a system. Another thing is actually, well, the humans, well, you got to train them to be able to stop someone. And you're not training them by saying, how you failed. You're training them by teaching them how to speak up, by teaching them how to stop it in the act and gain that confidence. You need to gain the confidence.
All right. Have you ever been a part of a test where the HR was a part of it and actually had good things to say about exactly this part?
I have never actually had HR in itself, but I had companies where the management has been very much on board with it, and been also said that, well, we will contact HR if needed, and having debrief if needed as well. And I had full access to seeing how they wanted to do it and how they were going to approach the talks afterwards.
Cool.
And then they had my phone number, so that the ones who were fooled could talk to me later on. And now that I think about it, there was actually one time where I experienced that HR was partly involved. I did not speak with them, but I know they spoke with them in the back. And I actually sent pretexts uphand, and they were, well, discarded or approved based on several people in the back. And I think HR was involved in that as well, because I told them that it was an important factor.
Yeah.
But I cannot confirm if it was an HR person or just someone someone in management, personnel responsible or something like that. But yeah, it is some people who do it.
I can understand the skepticism from like a CISO or somebody ordering a pen test to not want to involve HR. But I think it would be number one, good at anchoring the support you have in the organization, just making sure you get the full effect out of it. Even though HR can be very stiff sometimes, and also maybe I think that security people may be a little nicer than HR people sometimes. I don't know.
Yeah, and when it comes to humans, I mean, if you're doing it wrong, you're going to have a really bad time afterwards. I know it's a hassle to plan something when you feel like people are stopping you at every turn when it comes to humans, like, oh yeah, I want to test these people, and they'll be like, no, you shouldn't do it like that, etc. But if you're doing it wrong, and then you're going to have this big HR case against you later on, maybe it was best to actually do the hassle and take HR into account to begin with. So there is a lot of ways to do it, and not everything suits every organization, but one should at least think about it, because HR might have some intel on which people are not eligible for testing, for instance. Maybe they know someone who has, without being able to tell you, know someone who have been on sick leave. Maybe they've had a mental break or being burned out recently, and then you're coming there. Or maybe they have a lot of stress at work. It's their job, to at least protect them from, well, the company themselves attacking them. One thing is the attackers around us attacking them, but if the company is doing it as well, who can you trust in the end? Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Well, Bridget, do you have any closing thoughts? Any predictions or any cool things you're working on for the future? Would you like to share?
Well, first of all, I would say that this is not a simple thing to fix. It's not a thing that everyone can fix in the same way. It's all about the company culture on what is okay to test and not. It is all about the expectations and the management of them. And me coming here saying that, well, you should involve HR, you should do this and this and this. Well, it doesn't fit everyone. Like in a car, a tire does not fit every car. So you have to adapt and try to be as respectful as you can towards the people involved, and think of them as humans and not just some targets to gain access and to finally reach that goal. And for the future, I hope to look more into AI and how that will affect social engineering moving forward, because that is an interesting topic in itself, to see how will it be when it will be nearly impossible to distinguish a person's voice over the phone from an AI and someone you know really well, and to see how that will progress on, and to see how we can protect humans against that.
Yeah. Well, in the meantime, the least we can do is make sure that we are taking our fellow colleagues and humans into account when we have to give them potentially a hard message to hear, right? So.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Bridget, thank you so much for sharing.
I'm not
sure if I will
me.
ever order a pen test, but I will make sure I ask those questions if I do. And it'll be
really,
from you.
Really good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bridget. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
You too.